take it from there.
I am an advocate for traditional public schools. Like I had mentioned before in my previous introduction, I actually fought, or I was a robust voice for, or against, against 7069 and against 7055. And
Explain what that is.
7069 was the bill that was passed last year by Manny Diaz Jr. He was the architect. He works for charter schools, and the bill benefits charter schools incredibly. It's detrimental to public schools. Basically, it allocates a certain amount of money to charter schools and to public schools, and what the numbers were somewhere in the effect of about the students in charter schools got an additional $28 per student, and the students in public schools got an additional 47 cents per student, thanks to this bill. So it was very unfavorable and very detrimental to the public school system. So I was a voice against it back then. We tried to, educate the constituents, educate the people to call Rick Scott and to fight against it so that he wouldn't vote for it ultimately, but he did, and we have it. And my opponent actually voted against suing the state, which a lot of the counties in Florida did elect to sue the state because of this bill. And my opponent actually voted against it, and they didn't sue the state. So on top of that, 7055 is also it's also detrimental to public schools in that they are requiring now for the union, I believe, to have a 51% membership. So that bill also passed with similar architects, charter school, Senate, and House people put it together. And then 7026 came out after Parkland. The 7026, which they call the Marjorie Stoneman bill, has a few good things in it, in that it raises the age limit for guns, but at the same time, it allows teachers to be armed. So it gives a certain amount of money to train teachers so that they can be armed in schools. Luckily, our school board voted against it in Miami-Dade County. They voted against it in Broward, but there are other counties in Florida that are considering arming teachers thanks to this bill. I spoke up against the Senate Rules Committee against this bill, against the NRA basically, and I witnessed firsthand the hold that the NRA has on our state, on our legislators. So all of these things have actually ignited me and lit a fire under me to do what I can for the students of the county. I want to make sure that they are as safe as possible in within the reaches that I can attain.
So to be clear, what I'm hearing is that, one, you would support the teachers unions because you're opposed to that bill, and then two, what I'm more unclear about is exactly your position on charter schools, because as you know, about half of the applications that are coming in are charter schools. We are in the fourth largest school district in the country, and half of those schools, almost half of those schools, getting close to almost half of those schools are charters. So what would be your stance if the applications come in, and then are you for or against charter schools?
I'm not against charter schools at all. I just think that the bills and that the rules should be fair. I don't see a reason why they should favor charter schools more than public schools, for example. I think it should be fair, especially considering the fact that you have so many more programs in public schools. More programs are offered in public schools than there are offered in charter schools. You have special needs, you have nursing programs as far as children with that require medical needs, diabetes, insulin. They can't go to charter schools because they don't have those kinds of programs to help those children. So we need public schools, and I'm not against charter schools at all. I just think it should be a fair playing field. And overall, in the state of Florida, the number of charter schools versus public schools is about 10%. There's 10% charter schools and 90% public schools.
Maybe in the state of Florida, but in the state of
In Miami,
Miami-Dade,
it's getting, yeah.
in Miami-Dade County,
It's getting
we
higher.
are the fourth largest school district.
Right.
And so our funding is competing with the funding that's going to these private
Right.
private corporations,
Private,
really,
right.
because they're,
Publicly funded and privately run, right.
half of the schools in Miami-Dade County are charter, and that's taking from the funds that
That
would
goes
go
to the
into the public school.
Right,
So that's why I wanted to be clear on what your stance was.
right. Yeah, I just think it should be fair.
Can you define fair?
Equal, as far as if the monies are dispersed, they should be equally dispersed. As far as a per child basis, they should be the same amount distributed across the board.
Even though public schools offer more extra.
Well, that's why it should be at least equal, at minimum, which right now I don't think it's equal at all.
It's obvious that the state is trying to destroy the union.
Right,
Basically, the Republican Party is trying to destroy the union.
right.
What strategy would you think would be the most positive towards avoiding this from happening?
Well, I would, if I was elected, I would like to work with the legislators to maybe amend some of these bills if possible. And if we weren't able to amend them, work and try to get more membership so that the unions are not abolished per se.
How do you plan to get more membership?
Advocate for it, support it, train, teach teachers. A lot of the teachers sometimes don't have the right mentality about it, and you just have to get them to understand the benefits of being in a union.
You got a question? Okay. Anyone?
I have one.
You want?
I think a member already mentioned about the effort that the Republican state government is putting into kind of comes to the end to self-deport immigrants and their communities. And I noticed some differences between the public schools and the charter school in the last years, where kids that are undocumented or their parents are undocumented are required in a very subtle way, but you can tell they're trying to enforce immigration law, basically, because they're asking parents for some form of identification. Well, we don't have licenses for undocumented in this state. We used to, and the Republican Congress took them away. And the schools, like the charters, are not very flexible on that. They will not accept other forms of identification. They'll make people's life impossible. Very subtle, but their end is what they want, exactly, trying to discriminate and self-report some population. Would you be opposing some of these ways?
Yes. The problem with the charter schools, though, is that they have their own rules. And as a school board member, I can't tell them anything on how they can run anything. What I can do is advocate for the public schools and try to, unfortunately, the charter schools, after they get funding, they do this all the time. They'll either find a reason to have the students removed, convince the parents to move the kids, and a lot of the times they go to public schools and the public schools don't get funded for these kids. So it's the same thing with the issue that you're talking about. I actually know of a similar case of someone in our neighborhood, and unfortunately the school board can't say or do anything about it because they have their own bylaws, and we can't rule against them. We can't do anything against them, and that's in those types of things. Even though we do say, or they do say, where they stand as far as immigrant children and things like that.
Sheila, and then Rodrigo, and then Peter.
I'm going to take a little play from my brother's rule book over here, who's been doing a good job at putting a little education out, but then asking no questions. So I'm going to steal that tactic from you.
The problem is I don't see everybody here.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, in regards to, I guess this is a follow-up question based upon the question from my brother here. So, if And I understand that as, you know, as a board member, and these are private corporations really. So yeah, they have their own bylaws that you can't touch, but y'all are paying them. So
Right.
that's the only thing I'm gonna pull from our brother there, just a little bit of education. So at the end of the day, isn't it kind of interesting as a potential school board member, that you would be in charge of a budget, but you couldn't tell them what to do, right? Something's wrong with that picture.
Yes.
But I would say, in terms of the question of fairness, right? I'm not sure you're aware of this. I became aware of it after working with the teachers. So, you know, full-time enrollment, when it gets locked in, any student that comes in after full-time enrollment, that public school does not get funding for that child.
Exactly.
But the rules are that they have to take that child.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
So, my question is, how would you hold charter schools accountable if, and we know they do this, and they do this really well, after standardized testing, after FTE, they realize a student they don't want to have in their school anymore, they kick them out the day after, which makes our teachers have one hell of a job, because now they're dealing with oversized classrooms and the schools can't fund them. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
Yes.
So, okay, now that you are aware of that clearly, so I'm going to get deeper into the question.
This is a
in
common
what-
practice among charter schools. They do it all.
They do it all the time. They fire kids all the
And they
time.
don't,
as soon as
and they don't
get the
expel
money.
them. They talk to the parents and they convince the parents, your son would do so much better in a public school.
Right.
And they convince the parents to to pull their kids out, basically, and it looks like they pulled the kid out
Well,
instead
sometimes
of.
they really do just fire them.
Right,
So
right.
what would you do as a school board member to make sure that these charter schools that you have no control over, yet you take from the public school funding for, don't kick out those kids and load up our classrooms and overburden our teachers? And you know, I'm sorry, I'm a little upset. So,
No,
but
I agree.
that's really.
My biggest, I guess, learning curve was exactly what the school board can do to stop things like that from happening. I honestly feel like I may not know enough as far as what can be done, but I would like the opportunity to figure it out, because I have known about this for a long time too, and I don't think it's fair. I know people that work in like in public schools as far as helping out with programs in 504 plans and the IEP plans and all that stuff, and they deal with this and they see it all the time. I just personally don't know exactly how to handle it, what is within my realm of how I can stop them from doing that at this point.
Rodrigo.
Yeah. Okay, I'm with the National Association of Social Workers, so I'm a social worker, and I do happen to work in the schools as well. Public school funding is essential for our profession and what, you know, our values, and so when you started, just to remind you and just to let you know that when you started your conversation with wanting equal, you spoke about equal fairness and between those two systems. I mean, you can't have that.
Well, I meant with the funding.
With the funding, even worse. I mean, I don't understand where you're coming from of having an equal funding for public schools and charter schools. You know, that doesn't make sense, because if you are for that, you essentially are decimating further for public schools,
Well,
because of the funding issue that you're saying. We already established that, you know, charter schools, which we have a lot of, you know, in Miami-Dade County, charter schools are being funded now more exponentially with the new law that passed. So that's not going to happen. So I don't know how you.
Well, I was referring specifically to
Yeah.
Bill HB 7069 and how that one was more beneficial for charter schools than for public schools. I meant that one being more fair, so that the students in public schools got an equal share of that bill in particular, because that's money that was allocated from that bill alone. Other than that, however the funds are allocated should be obviously they're managed in the budget by the school board. But certain bills, like that bill that was so detrimental to the public schools, should have been fair, is what I meant. I didn't mean specifically that it should be across the board equal. I just meant that bill should have been more equal. And if there's a way of making it equal, as far as me working with legislators or advocating with other legislators after these elections, that maybe these bills can be corrected in some way.
Do you know any other school board members who are supportive of the position you have that you can?
Supportive of the bill?
No, of you, of like the positions that you have, other school board members that you can ally with and pass those reforms that you said.
Yes, but they won't ally with me yet.
You need to win.
No, that's a fair question.
Right.
Do you know? Are you familiar with school board members that have the same vision that you have?
As far as their, I would say, fight against bills like this, because
Yeah.
I have been watching the school board meetings for the last year and a half, and I've been watching how the votes have come out. With this bill in particular, I do know which school board members were against this bill in particular. So yes, I would know who I could speak to ally with. I just don't think that they would ally with me right now because I'm not.
Who are those people?